This is a review of the LEGO left and right manual points with electric rails, which is set number 7856. 7856 was released in 1980 as a core part of the 12-volt layout. Like most other supplemental sets, they were continued until nearly the end of the Gray era. Production stopped somewhere between 1989 and 1993. The addition of points allows you to create new types of layouts and add components to your layouts, such as passing lines, switch yards, and additional loops. The 7856 contains parts to build two manual points, one left and one right. The set includes a left and a right point, 6 sleeper plates, 4 plates for attaching to the bottom of the rails, 2 point indicator bricks, which go on top of the point motors, and then the manual point motors themselves. So that brings me to the point motors. The 7856 comes with 2 manual point motors, and I refer to these as manual point motors because typically when people talk about point motors, they're speaking of the ones included in sets such as 7863, which can be operated remotely via a cable connection port. So here's an example of one of those electric point motors. If I compare it to a manual point motor, you'll see they look like exactly the same from this side, but the electric point motor has this plug which you obviously can plug a cable into, and then that will activate it remotely. You may be able to see also that there are 2 holes on each one here. The manual point motor doesn't have anything in there, but you might be able to see a little bit. There's metal right on the far side of that hole, and there's nothing on the electric one because the manual one I think uses electromagnets to activate. The manual point motors, they're exclusive to this set and they can only be operated by hand, not by an electric cable. And the point motors, they have an axle on top that can turn, so that axle is turning, and what happens when you turn that axle the slot, hopefully you can see this, maybe the glare is bad, but oh, there you can see. So on the bottom, there's a slot, and if I turn the point motor, that slot kind of moves. Because what's happening right there is that the motor is turning a disc underneath, and when that disc rotates, there's a cutout in the disc that moves from side to side, and so what that's meant to do is activate the derailleur lever on the points. So and then there are also magnets on the inside which ensure that the disc, once it hits either far point, it can't really turn anymore. So you see if I take one of these bricks and I put it on there, I push a little bit, it'll flip to that other point because the magnet is it's just securing it there. And then it's the same thing with the electric point motors. So I'll put the electric one aside. And then, so to actually assemble this set, what you need to do is, so you take your point bases, and then the point motors, what you have to do is you have to line them up carefully, because on each point base you can see there's this black lever here. This is what controls the derailleur. So if I move this from side to side, that derailleur will go to either the diverging position here or the through position where the train will just go straight through. On the underside you can see that black lever. It's a little bit hard to see, but if I move this from side to side, that black lever moves underneath. So you're going to need to line that up. So if I put the lever in the through position, which is on this left point, that lever is going to be to the left. I also need to make sure that the point motor, that slot there, is going to be to the left when I put it on. So this part, you want the slot to be on this side because obviously I'm going to flip it over. So make sure that if you're putting on the left one, this axle should be turned all the way to the right, and then hopefully if you line it up correctly, you can just put that on. And then the point indicator brick has to go on the point motor. How that works is this, it has 2 patterns to indicate whether the track is in the through or diverging position. The through position, it should be the narrow end here. So right now the derailleur is in the through position, so the train just will go straight through the point. And you want to have the narrow side with the white rectangle facing towards the oncoming track. And then if I flip it here, it'll go to the diverging position, and you can see that the point indicator brick is now on the circle with the line through it, which indicates that the train, if it's coming through on the oncoming track, it will go to the left and onto the diverging track. And then the other parts that are included with the set, there are these plates, which just, they line up with the little parts in the bottom there. And then, so the small one goes to the right, the long one goes to the left. And then obviously there are 3 sleepers for each point, which, I mean, I'm just putting them on here, but you'll need to take them off and then kind of secure the points with them after you've attached them using the connection rails. And then that's one of the points, and it's complete now. And then you can see again, this is the point in action. And again, these are manual point motors. You cannot use a cable to activate them. Those are the electric point motors, only included in sets 7863, 7858, and 7859. One important aspect of the point is that it has the metal conducting part here. So unlike 9-volt points, that metal is active at all times if there's power running through it. In case you didn't know, the 9-volt points, they only supply power to the track that the derailleur is set to. So if you have the derailleur set to the diverging position, then it will only have power to the diverging track. And so because of this, they have to have this plastic block in the middle, and you can see there's conducting metal on these rails, but it only goes up to here, and then there's metal here, but they only, it stops like right at this plastic block. And the reason for this is obviously it would short circuit if you had the metal pieces going all the way through, because they would have to cross each other, and short circuits are not good for the transformer. So they are connected underneath this plastic block, but so that they don't interfere with each other, but on the top you can't have them connecting. So that means that there is a dead spot on the motor. So let me actually grab a motor here. So the motor has 2 sets of contacts, which means that when you have it running over a point, one set of contacts should always touch the metal at one time. So even if I put it here, it's a little bit hard to see, but the back set of contacts is about right here. It means it's over the dead spot, but the front set of contacts will be over the metal here. That does mean that you really need to make sure that the points are clean, because if they're dirty, I mean, these are a little bit dirty, but the metal, if it's too dirty, then it will run over a dead spot, and then the train will just get stuck on the point, and that's not good. So you always want to make sure that your points are clean. Be careful when you're disassembling a layout with points, since they're fragile and can break fairly easily. In terms of part variants, I think the only parts which can vary depending on the release date of a specific set are the sleepers and points themselves. Early sleepers without cable grooves in the bottom are replaced with later ones with cable grooves in the bottom, somewhere between 1980 and 1982. So this set includes, well, I mean, it's not a set because I bought pieces for it, but I do have cable grooves in these sleepers that are included with this set. So for point variants, the most noticeable difference is the pins on the point motor attachment base. So if I take this point motor off, you'll actually see that one of these points has the pins on this side, and these are meant to secure the point motor once it's on there. And then so this is an early point. The point on the left does not have those pins. So the motor is a little bit less secure, but I mean, it's still pretty secure in both ways. So like I already said, the points from the early 80s had those Technic pins. Points from the later part of the 1980s, those pins are removed because they ended up breaking a lot. You can see on this one half of this pin is broken. There are also some slight mold variations in the points. So for my points, I've noticed that I have one with a hole similar to the ones in the sleeper plates. So you can see in the middle of the sleeper plate, there's a hole maybe for securing it with a nail or something like that. I have one point with that kind of hole, like right around this part. I don't have it out right now, but one of my points does have that kind of nail hole almost. And then I've also seen at least 3 different molds for the underside of the conducting rail. So this one you can see, I don't know if these are different. Oh yeah, these are the same for the bottom of the conducting rails. But I have some that have like these kind of dividers. There are more dividers in the middle, and that makes it harder to put the regular gray plates on, and that's a little bit annoying, but oh well. And then there, of course, also later points had these like kind of slots in the metal on the underside, on the bottom of the metal. You can see that. So this is a pretty late point actually. And then earlier points did not have those kinds of grooves in the metal. It was the same with 12-volt rails. So I don't really know the full story behind these like very slight variations, but they don't really seem to serve a major functional difference other than the Technic pins on early points, and that makes it more difficult to remove the point motor. In fact, I've broken a couple pins removing point motors from mine. I already explained how to assemble and use the points, but their function in the layout is important as well. One thing to note is that the geometry of these points is different than newer ones. 9V and RC points need to have another track piece at the split end to have the main and diverging tracks parallel, and therefore are 3 track segments long. But 12V gray arrow points follow the geometry of the blue arrow points, so they are only 2 track segments long. Additionally, the distance between the split tracks is 0 studs instead of 8 like the newer points. That means that there are 2 studs of space between trains on tracks next to each other, since the tracks are 8 studs wide including sleepers, but rails and trains are only 6 studs wide. Because of this, you have to be a little careful with engines and wagons that have large overhangs, since in certain setups they can bump into each other and get stuck. Without points, layouts would be limited to pretty boring circles and ovals. Points allow you to make sidings, switchyards, and more complex layouts. Arranging the points like this on a standard layout, obviously with maybe more straight track in between, will allow you to make what is known as a passing line in between them, and that is a track that kind of comes out from the main line, and a common use for that passing line is to put a signal set, which is set number 7860, on that passing line, and then you can isolate a train there. You can use a single point to create a stub end siding, and you can also isolate a train on that with a signal as well. You can make switchers with several stub end sidings and passing lines, and using a decoupler or two makes for a great shunting experience. However, doing these things with only manual points is a bit boring and inconvenient, since every time you want to flip a point, you have to reach over to change it. To really understand the full 12V experience, I would highly recommend purchasing 1 or 2 copies of 7863, which includes parts to upgrade a single point to remote control, along with the set to upgrade these manual points into remotely operated points. Or instead of buying those 3 sets, just buy 7858 and 7859 for 1 of each remote controlled point. I don't have the original box for this set. Like other supplemental sets, it had a cardboard outer box and a styrofoam inner tray. Additionally, the box got a redesign in 1989 with a cardboard tray instead of styrofoam, and it was slightly bigger with different art. For this set, there were no specific instructions in 1980, but I think in 1981 they may have included point-specific instructions. I think in 1980 they included the generic instructions for all supplemental sets. So I have a copy of those instructions here, which have the transformer on the cover, but they fold out. And inside are, hopefully you can see that, instructions for a bunch of supplemental sets, including the points and then the decoupler here. So that's how you know it was made in 1981, because the decoupler was only introduced in 1981. They also have the signal here. On the other side, the transformer, and then the 7861 lighting set. I don't have the specific instructions for the points that may have been included in 1981. And of course, since these sets never came with sticker sheets, because there were no stickers in them. This set, like most other supplemental sets, is priced fairly consistently. Most listings are between $15 and $40, depending on condition and if you want the box and inner box or not. A sealed copy of 7856 will generally be listed for around $80. I didn't actually buy a full set of 7856, I just bought the parts individually, but I would guess I paid around $20 for the parts. This is a great starter add-on set for a 12V layout because it allows for a lot of new layout possibilities. However, if you can afford it, I would highly recommend upgrading it with 2 copies of 7863 to convert the points to remote control, or better yet, just get a 7858 and 7859. Manual points are good enough, but to really experience the 12V system, electric capabilities, and model train level realism, you'll need the remotely operated points. That concludes the review of the 7856. If you found this video helpful or interesting, be sure to subscribe. I'll see you in my next video.